Chapter 1. The Eighth Family, a knightly lineage of the Holy Empire. The story of Kim Yo-han, a knight born with power in the Eighth Family, a knightly family of the Holy Empire. After dying in an unexpected accident, Kim Yo-han was reborn with dragon power in the Eighth Family, a knightly family of the Holy Empire. And then 17 years passed. Kim Yo-han had no choice but to admit that life here was not so easy. The Eighth Family was among the many noble families in the empire, but so small that it could hardly be considered significant in the family tree. Unlike other knights who lacked a fiefdom, the Eighth Family at least had a small town as their territory, which might be considered fortunate. However, the chances of this town falling into Johan's hands were slim. Jessen Eights had too many children. His eldest, second, and third sons from his fourth wife, his fourth and fifth from his third wife. Johan's mother, who gave birth to him, was Jessen's second wife. She passed away shortly after his birth, leaving Johan without any memory of her. Still, his situation was difficult enough. It would have been even more complicated if he had been illegitimate. The sons of Jessen's fourth wife, being older, naturally despised Johan and the children from the other wives. The current Mrs. Eight also disliked Johan and the children from the other wives. Excluded from the two main factions in the fiefdom, other than Sir Jessen himself, Johan's life was inevitably hard. Unless Sir Jessen mediated, which he rarely did, as he showed little interest in the affairs of the fiefdom. Sir Jessen spent most of the year away from the fiefdom. What he did during this time was unclear, but he seemed very busy. When he did return, he mostly indulged in strong drinks. Johan had rarely seen his father, Sir Jessen, himself. Thus, the fiefdom was managed by Sir Jessen's subordinates, his wife, and his older sons. And caught in the middle were sons like Johan. At least the other sons had brothers from the same mother for support, but Johan was truly alone. Had he been smaller, he would have been relentlessly bullied. "Ah, Johannim." "Hello." "Yes." Johan greeted the serf. Though the Eighth Family had a fiefdom, they were a small and poor noble family, not owning an expensive castle. Their residence was a moderately-sized mansion adjacent to a village. Compared to the village houses, it seemed luxurious like a castle. Consequently, the sons of the Eighth Family had no choice but to interact closely with the villagers. Sons like Johan, who were more distant, even more so. While most behaved arrogantly due to their noble status, Johan was different. It was not in his nature, and he saw no benefit in earning the wrath of the serfs. As a result, the villagers liked Johan. Despite his youth, he had the stature of a knight and a commendable personality. In the village, there were talks that Johan should succeed Sir Jessen. However, these words meant nothing. The serfs, tied to their fiefdom and farming, had no influence. Even if Sir Jessen suddenly passed away, the decision would be made by his retainers, wife, and older sons. "What's up?" "It's Johan." "Don't look." "Idiot." Walking past the wheat fields near the village, there was a fairly dense forest. It was a dense forest that the elders of the village called the Devil's Forest, where light did not enter even in broad daylight. Unlike Earth, the Holy Empire was full of places that were not cleared like this. It was a world where you had to be afraid of beasts jumping out of the forest even on the road. And there were only a few people in the village who could enter that forest. Most of the serfs were forbidden to enter the forest unless it was a special time. The trees and beasts of the forest belonged to the feudal lord. Only the son of the feudal lord or the hunters who were allowed could enter the forest. Naturally, it was his half-brothers who were telling Johan not to look at him now. Johan shook his head. Such a quarrel was now pitiful. At first, he didn't tolerate it and fought back, but now he was so annoyed that he ignored it and passed by. He knew that he shouldn't do it with force, but the other side only quarreled with their mouths and didn't come any closer. They knew very well that there was nothing good about bumping into Johan. Johan ignored it and stood in front of the dense oak tree. He was thinking of doing what he did every day. "I don't know if it's okay to just train like this." Over 180 centimeters physique. When he fought with other brothers, he was so powerful that he could win against 4. From the moment he was born, Johan had a blessed body. It was a similar appearance to his previous life, but it attracted much more attention. Overall, people's physiques were smaller. Even Johan's half-brothers were sons of knights and ate and slept well, so their physiques were above average, but they looked poor compared to Johan. Besides, Johan clenched his fist. The grip felt stronger than before. The Bugman's Law. The law that the colder the animal lives, the bigger it gets. Did the environment of this world increase Johan's strength like that? He didn't know why he felt stronger even though his physique was the same. Johan stopped worrying and started exercising. It was a workout he had been doing since Earth. No matter how physically gifted he was, he couldn't get stronger without training. And in this part of the training, Johan was confident. A person who is more familiar with modern and scientific training methods than anyone in the Empire. Although there are no devices and it is difficult to adjust the diet, Johan made the maximum effort within his ability. The result was his current body. The problem is that this is not a modern world, but a different world with a medieval feel. It was not a world where you could succeed by being good at unarmed mixed martial arts, but a world where you could succeed by knowing how to swing a sword in armor. And Johan didn't learn this part at all. It wasn't just Johan. Most of the other half-brothers were similar. It was because Sir Jessen was so indifferent to his children. It was okay to just wander around outside the fiefdom. There were many such people among the knights. However, such knights usually sent their children to other knights for squire training. It was common for knights to exchange their children to train them into excellent knights. A knight was not made overnight. From a young age, they consistently learned things necessary as a knight, such as swordsmanship, etiquette, tactics, and strategy. Among Sir Jessen's sons, only the eldest or second eldest received knight training, and the youngest son, now Mrs. 8's son, was learning under a home tutor. What about the rest? They were just living comfortably. Johan shook his head as he watched his half-brothers go hunting in the forest with their swords. How nice it would have been if he could live comfortably like that. But he couldn't. Unlike them, who didn't know their situation, Johan was fully aware of his situation. Think about it. What if Sir Jessen dies? Sir Jessen is already past middle age and looking at old age, and in this world, it's rare for humans to live beyond 60 or 70, let alone 100. There was no such thing as a knight preventing aging with internal power, as in the fantasy novels Johan had read. To Johan's eyes, it seemed difficult for Sir Jessen to live more than 10 years. He was extremely fat and old, but he still loved alcohol and women. When Sir Jessen dies, one of the eldest or youngest sons will succeed the knight title. Johan didn't know who it would be. Whoever wins the fight will take it. The problem was the remaining sons like Johan. If the brothers were close, they would have taken care of at least one feudatory position, but from Johan's perspective, there was no chance. Whoever rises, the brothers with different mothers seemed likely to be driven out of the feudatory. Honestly, he didn't think they would even do that. In the past, he didn't understand why the second and third sons of lower nobles in history went into the military so much, but now that he was experiencing it himself, he understood completely. There was nothing else to do. He was a son of a formal knight family, so he was a nobleman for now, and he didn't think about doing business or farming, but he still needed money to eat and live. If he had received training as a squire under a knight, he would have continued to run as a knight and aimed to enter under another nobleman who had a feudatory, but he had not received training, so there was no way. Should I ask to be sent to another knight with a big heart? I'm still his child. Damn. I can't try anything because he isn't involved in the feudatory. Johan resented Sir Jessen. He couldn't try anything because he was away all the time. In the end, there was only one thing Johan could do. Training. He didn't know how meaningful bare-handed martial arts would be, but he had to do it because he was anxious. How useful it would be when others were wearing armor and swinging swords. And the other half-brothers laughed at Johan like that. In their eyes, Johan seemed to be doing strange things with his bare body. Are you bewitched by a witch? Ha ha ha. Sure. If the new priest hears you, it'll be a big deal. Hello, Johannim. Hunter Joseph bowed politely. Johan was as courteous as a knight in a bard song, but that made him all the more cautious. Joseph, are you ready? Yes. Johan stared intently at Joseph. It was initially uncomfortable to treat a middle-aged man arrogantly, but he had gotten used to it now. If he was unnecessarily kind, it would only make the other person feel more burdened, and if it reached others' ears, it could cause unnecessary problems. On the hunter's waist were a crude dagger and a few pouches of medicine. These were unique medicines passed down among the hunters, ranging from painkillers to drugs used to lure animals. In addition, a bow and arrows. That was all the weaponry a hunter had. There were no chainmail, gauntlets, metal boots, or even a thick cloth armor called a gambeson. If a hunter had such equipment, he would have sold it for money immediately. He was worried about what would happen if he encountered a beast, but the hunter's answer was simple. Chapter 2. It was a simple but true statement. Going to a place where formidable beasts appear was not for hunters, but for mercenaries or knights. Even in this world where aura and inner strength were scarce and magic was rare, there were monsters. The particularly strong beasts that were difficult for humans to deal with were precisely these monsters. When such monsters appeared, people called for mercenaries or knights. It was curious how they could deal with creatures several times stronger than ordinary beasts without guns, but from the stories passed down, it seemed possible to confront them. Well, there must be a way. In the past, when there were no guns, people would have hunted beasts with just spears. The people here were no different. Let's go. Yes, I'll take the lead. Joseph was one of the few people in the village who had permission to enter the forest. While others would be severely punished if caught, Joseph was allowed to hunt there. Joseph was responsible for managing the forest to keep others out, guide Sir Jason if he wanted to hunt in the forest, and serve as a soldier in case of war. Of course, Joseph had no intention of fulfilling the last duty. If a war broke out, he planned to pack his belongings and flee. He had run away to this place and had no intention of becoming a human shield for the nobles. Joseph thought about Johann, who was following him through the forest. This was not the first time he had hunted with Johann. When Joseph first met Johann, he bowed his head and bit his tongue. Sir Jason had so many sons that there were more than a few who came to him to be hunting attendants. Of course, he couldn't accommodate all such requests. Strictly speaking, only Sir Jason had the right to make such a request. The other sons did not have that right. Fortunately, Joseph had an excuse. A noble's hunt was different from a hunter carrying a single bow into the hunt. The noble's attendants followed, and soldiers followed to guard those attendants. It was more like a hunt where beaters drove the animals towards them than a traditional hunt where they searched for animals. Naturally, it cost a fortune. Even the nobles couldn't do it casually. Especially not the not-so-wealthy Yates family. Moreover, the sons of the Yates family did not have the authority to make such decisions. Joseph thought Johann would complain and back off. He was prepared for insults or spitting. But the answer that came back was unexpected. Joseph was taken aback. And he was disgusted. What nonsense. Wanting to go on a hunter's hunt. It was clear that a noble's child would get bored in a few hours. And if he acted rashly and got hurt. But he couldn't refuse. If he refused here, even the good-natured Johann would surely get angry. Joseph, who had his inner thoughts exposed, blushed. It was a mistake to think that Johann was easy to deal with because he was young. Johann was smarter than he thought. In the end, Joseph went hunting with Johann, albeit reluctantly. And it didn't take long for him to have to admit it. Johann wasn't lying. Johann was surprisingly patient for a noble. He followed the insignificant hunter's instructions without complaining, waited when told to wait, and didn't complain about camping in the cold night dew. Thanks to that, the initial worry had long disappeared. Instead, curiosity arose when the worry disappeared. Knights would scoff at it, but the skills of a hunter were not easy to learn. Moreover, Joseph's skills were even more so. The method of tracking the traces of animals, the method of walking quickly in the forest without making a sound, the method of setting traps according to the animals, the method of camping avoiding beasts and bugs. When a war broke out, it was not for nothing that hunters were used as scouts. However, no matter how much he thought about it, it was not a skill that nobles should learn. Joseph! What are you doing? Ah. Yes. I'm sorry. Joseph was startled and shook his head. It was a mistake that should not be made, even if it was the beginning of the forest, to think about other things. Is this a footprint? Yes. You found it correctly. It's really a nobleman's excellent skill. It's not something anyone can find. Originally, it's not easy to find footprints when the weather is like this, but you found it. It's definitely Johannim. It must be that God recognizes you and helps you. I see. Johann nodded with a twitching face. Such a flattering compliment. But Joseph couldn't help it. There were many nobles who got angry if they didn't do so. Can I set a trap right away? No, Johannim. Find the footprints of the beast and set a trap on the path where those footprints lead. This was the first method Joseph taught. Why? Look closely. The footprints of the usual blue deer are dug deeper. It's definitely a pregnant female. Females, especially pregnant blue dot deer, are more sensitive than usual. If you set a trap recklessly, you may not be able to catch it. Johann nodded his head. To Johann, who had lived in the city all his life, every teaching of Joseph was touching. Then what should I do? You have to avoid its sense of smell, so you'll use this herb powder. The combination is red cake grass with a kinnan tree and small devil grass. Right. Yes. You remember well. Experienced and cunning hunters also knew the knowledge of herbalists. A hunter who can make various medicines by combining common herbs was respected in the village. And Joseph was a hunter among hunters. If you sprinkle this herb powder, it will be confused because its sense of smell is paralyzed. No matter how sensitive it is, it won't notice the trap. Now you can install it. Johann's skill, who had done it several times, was familiar. He skillfully carved a tree and hung a spear, and put a resilient rope. The moment you touch it, the spear will fly and pierce the body of the deer. You did well. Now let's install a few more. There was no hunter who set only one trap. And Joseph didn't usually aim for deer. If you catch a lot of animals like deer, you could be caught by the feudal lord. What Joseph usually caught was rabbits or badgers, foxes or birds. He could catch wolves if he wanted to, but he usually didn't. Unless it appears in the village and attacks people, there is no need to do so. Joseph. Yes? What's that, wolf? Joseph turned his head in surprise. Far away, a black wolf was staring at him through the dense trees. This was not an area where wolves appeared. To see the territory of the wolves in the forest, he had to go further for about a day. Moreover, there were no signs of a wolf appearing. Footprints, feces, characteristic claw marks. Joseph realized that the wolf was not the one he usually saw in the forest. Its fur was so glossy black and its size seemed to be twice as big as other wolves. Among the beasts, those who were born with great strength and continued to fight and survive were unusually large. These beasts behaved and moved differently from ordinary beasts. Even savvy hunters didn't want to deal with these exceptional beasts, monsters. Johann, you must never act rashly. I know. Johann didn't show it, but he knew how dangerous the situation was. Seeing Joseph like this, he realized that the wolf was an unexpected enemy. Moreover, the oppressive atmosphere it exuded was no joke. Even Johann, who had never seen a monster, thought, "Is that a monster?" As the son of a knight, Johann had received a long sword. It was a bit old and unimpressive, but it was considered a proper weapon in this village. The problem was that Johann didn't know how to use a sword. He felt more confident fighting with his bare hands than with a sword. Slowly, don't provoke it and back off. With that, Joseph put a pouch filled with powder that beasts hate between his fingers. Then he picked up his bow and strung an arrow. He was confident in his archery skills, but he wasn't confident against it. Joseph prayed that it wouldn't follow him. The wolf suddenly turned around and disappeared into the dark forest. Joseph let out a sigh of relief. Let's run away quickly. Emerging from the forest, Joseph panted and said, "It looks like a monster no matter how you look at it. I should tell everyone not to go near the forest for a while. Just my luck to see a black wolf." Among the hunters, the black wolf was a bad omen. Johann thought as he saw this. Joseph was a good teacher. He answered everything Johann asked, perhaps because of the difference in status. He wouldn't have bothered if the other boys in the village had asked. But he couldn't force a frightened Joseph to go to the forest. It would be dangerous for Johann too. I understand. You've worked hard too. No, it's not. It's amazing that you, Johann, are not flustered. Yeah. I understand, so rest well, and let's talk again when the wolf is gone. Johann sent Joseph away and sat down on the desolate hill in front of the village. For a while, he had to stay still and train near the village. Johann was startled. There was a guest under the tree where he usually sat alone. It didn't look like a person from the village at a glance. Judging by the shabby luggage thrown next to him and the thick, worn-out coat he was wearing while sleeping, he was clearly a wanderer. Even the serfs of the village couldn't treat Johann casually, and if he was a wanderer, he could kick him out. But Johann didn't do that. Johann moved his steps and moved to another tree. And he started exercising. His muscles tightened and made a creaking sound from the tree. You're doing something interesting. Are you the son of Sir Jessen? Johann stopped exercising and turned his head. The old wanderer had already gotten up and was looking this way. Chapter 3. How did he know I was from the Eights family? Oh well. Doc, could you tell what I was thinking? Who else would be hanging around here with a longsword at this time? Now Johann was wearing casual clothes and there was no family crest anywhere, but that longsword was enough. May I ask your name? Johann. I'm Johann Eights. I can't believe you're Sir Jessen's son. Johann looked at the old man with a puzzled look. What brings you here? What brings me here? I always come here. Ah, I apologize. I was rude. No. It's fine. Do as you please. Johann waved his hand and was about to move on. Then the old man spoke again. May I ask one more thing? I don't mind, but who are you? Johann looked the old man up and down. One eye seemed to be blind, it was grey. Other than that, he was dressed normally. He's a pretty well-kept old man for his age. Johann realized that the old man had a straight back and a sturdy physique. Such old men were rare in the town. I'm Kegel, a wanderer roaming the empire. I see. Kegel. What brings you to this uninteresting town? As I said, Johann Nim. Wanderers just wander. There's no reason. Besides, an uninteresting town? This warm and well-kept town is rare in the empire. Kegel exaggerated, but Johann didn't think it was sincere. In the first place, the Eights family's territory wasn't that great. Johann decided not to argue. It wasn't a big deal, and he didn't feel bad about the territory being laughed at. I see. What do you want to ask? If you're Sir Jessen's son, are you currently training as a squire? Are you mocking me right now? No. Why would I? If I were training as a squire, I would be under another knight. When they were young, they entered under another knight as a page, gained experience and became a squire, and later became a knight by making a contribution. This was the usual case. Of course, even if they didn't go that far, the children of noble knight families could say I'm a knight and get away with it, but the son of a lower-class noble without any skills would only end up being laughed at. That's true, but there could be other cases. Sir Jessen calls another knight to the territory to teach. So that's what you meant. That's what John is getting. Mrs. Eights had called a retired knight to the mansion to teach her youngest son, John. The old man nodded and said, The youngest? So you're not really training? I'm not training. Why do you keep bothering me? I'm sorry. You don't look like you haven't trained. Johann realized why the old man was acting that way upon hearing his words. For someone untrained, Johann's appearance was too plausible. Even for a wanderer, he seemed to know too much about the lives of knights. Of course, he could have picked it up while working in another knight's family. Oh my. Then I'll be on my way. Ah. Johann Nim. Is there a place in the town where I can sleep for the night? Go down the hill and look for a house with a long and wide door. There's no second floor, but there's a back room for occasional travelers. If it had been a larger town, there would have been a separate inn doing business, but there was none in this town. There was only a pub that also served as an inn. Of course, it was enough for wanderers to drink, sleep, and go for a night. This pub was owned by the feudal lord, Sir Jessen. Like other facilities such as the mill, it was a place where people who had received permission from the lord operated and raised income. Spies or suspicious people wouldn't bother coming to Eights' feudatory. There was no value in doing so. And even if they did, Johann had no intention of stepping forward. If it was related to the Eights family, shouldn't the well-off half-brothers or Mrs. Eights step forward? Kegel quickly became friends with the people in the town. It wasn't hard to get along. All it took was a bit of skill and some Empire's silver coins. When a harmless wanderer praises their town and even offers drinks, the usually bored farmers would flock to him and start asking questions. There was a hearth in the middle of the dirt floor. A stew that seemed to have been boiling for quite a while was bubbling on the hearth dug into a pit. It wasn't cooked with a particular dish in mind. Even the tavern owner probably didn't know exactly what was in the stew. It was always boiled with whatever ingredients were available. But the town of Eights was not lacking in salt or spices, so the taste was decent. Thanks to its location on the ancient empire's trade route, merchants always brought goods, which was a boon. Thanks to this, Kegel was somewhat satisfied. He had eaten much worse dishes before. For a wanderer, This was a feast. But about Sir Jessen's son. Which son? The tall, well-built one. Ah, Johann Nim. I saw him for the first time, and his presence is no joke. Is he the successor? What? No. No. The successor is Philip Nim. But I can understand why you'd be confused. At first glance, Johann looks much more like a knight, doesn't he? You fool. Can you become a successor just by looking the part? Don't say such nonsense. Kegel listened to the farmer's conversation with interest. He poured them a light beer and asked a question, and they started talking on their own. They usually didn't have a chance to relax and chat like this, so they couldn't stop talking. To Kegel's eyes, Johann was a young man born with a body given by the gods. Elastic and strong muscles, quick reflexes. He was the very embodiment of a warrior's physique. What was surprising was that he was trained enough to fight at any moment. Could a young man who had not received any instruction be capable of such training on his own? Kegel became interested. He didn't believe in the prophecy of the Witch of Asman, but now that he saw Johann, he began to trust the witch's prophecy. The witch laughed softly. The scent spread in the tent made Kegel's old body feel heavier. Kegel shook his head. With 1 Empire gold coin, you could play and eat for several months even in a city with high prices. There were plenty of serfs who had never seen a gold coin in their lives. But he didn't think about saving it. Only a fool would break a promise with a witch. Kegel didn't believe in gods, but he was an old assassin who believed in superstitions. Even this witch was not a witch from the Osman Empire, far to the east of the Holy Empire. It was rumored that the witches of the Osman Empire were even called upon by the Sultan to predict the future. Neither Kegel nor the witch had a respectable status. The witch was a heretic who believed in a different god than the Holy Empire's church, and Kegel was an assassin. The unofficial swordsmanship guild of the Holy Empire. Kegel was one of the masters of that guild. In the Empire, there were official swordsmanship guilds that purely honed their swordsmanship and pledged loyalty to the feudal lord of the city, and there were illegal guilds that hid in the shadows of the city and took illegal requests. A guild where delinquents, thieves, and murderers gathered. Not all swordsmen who learned swordsmanship were righteous. The underground swordsmanship guilds flourished as much as the above-ground swordsmanship guilds. And he was one of the most prosperous among the underground swordsmanship guilds. Kegel, who had lived without regrets all his life, had one regret as his death approached. That was the fact that his skills would disappear as they were. Unlike the official guilds, the unofficial guilds were far from the concept of master and disciple and the transmission of swordsmanship. They had to learn on their own and steal swordsmanship on their own. If they couldn't, they would die. Kegel was proud to have mastered the secret techniques of swordsmanship handed down in. He melted what he had experienced and felt into it and created a new swordsmanship. But there was no one to teach. The young men who newly joined were trash, just like the people who joined. Even if they tolerated their dog-like and vulgar character and temperament, their skills and talents did not please him. Was he supposed to take as disciples those clumsily evil guys who might use the swordsmanship he taught to kill him right away? Kegel didn't want to do that. He suddenly realized why the official guilds were strong. They would naturally be strong because they received systematic instruction and transmission. In the end, Kegel went to the witch. He tried to get a prophecy with the feeling of grabbing at straws. And now, Kegel was happy that the prophecy was unexpectedly not wrong. May the blessing of the divine be with you. May the blessing of the divine be upon you. Valberga, a clergyman in charge of the church in the feudal territory, bowed before Johann. He spent the afternoon assisting with church duties alongside Valberga. Most of Sir Jessen's sons were far from devout. Amidst this, Valberga was delighted to see Johann frequently visiting the church, demonstrating his faith. Johann Nim. The divine is surely watching over your dedication. Chapter 4. I feel filled with light when I think of your excellency watching. Johann said so and grumbled to himself. Helping Valberga was not out of faith in God, nor was it to win Valberga's favor. If the church here had been a bit bigger and more substantial, Johann might have tried to win some favor. But the church here was small and humble, befitting the size of the estate. The only priest available was Valberga. This Valberga had to take on all the miscellaneous tasks of the estate, from baptism to mass, blessings, etc. There were some errand boys and servants to help, but Priest Valberga was the type to do as much of the work given by God himself. It was best for Johann to learn while helping out, as there would be problems if Johann said, "Quit the estate job and teach me first. He's a decent person, but I'm not going to be a priest or enter a monastery." Priest Valberga was a pure priest who believed solely in God without any particular ties to the church. There wasn't much he could do for Johann. The reason Johann wanted to help was to learn literature. If he learned the most difficult ancient imperial language used by scholars and clergy on the continent or the elves of the Catalian Peninsula, Holy Empire language or Erland's kingdom language was easy. They all had quite a few similarities. Not many people knew how to write and read. Not only the serfs, but also the nobles. There was a lot of thinking like, why should I learn when I can hire someone who knows the letters? Those who could write and read were the clergy who had to read the scriptures of the church or the merchants of the city. Here, Priest Valberga was the most educated person in the estate. The religion was not much different in the Holy Empire. Our God, who is light and sun, is one, wants faith, the Pope is the highest, so pay tithes. Sometimes a great priest shows a miracle, but Johann didn't have much faith. It seemed hard to believe until he saw it with his own eyes. Rather, the letters he taught like this felt more amazing. Learning was a good thing. As you learn, fear disappears and confidence arises. Knowing how to write and read the ancient imperial language, and moreover, Johann was proficient in calculations. The mathematical ability of a modern person who can do calculus was not common in this world. Valberga admired Johann's talent given by God when he did the calculations necessary for estate management. At first, when he was praised for doing some mental arithmetic, Johann thought. But soon he was able to realize the reason. They didn't use Arabic numerals here. Johann was shocked. In the ancient empire, they used to calculate in a primitive way, writing one by one like 1, 2, 3, without any zeros to align the digits. It was a mess and mistakes were common. Even now, it's unbelievable when you think about it. The more abilities Johann has that others don't, the easier it will be for him to survive. Johann planned to scrape together whatever assets he had and head to a city with a port once Lord Ates died. He thought there would be many places to work in a city with a port. Whether using his body or his mind. Walking from the church to the feudal lord's office, Johann felt something was off. There was a prickling sensation on the back of his neck. He didn't expect anyone to be lying in wait for him here, so his reaction was slow. Johann quickly tensed up and looked around. Impressive. You noticed. You're not a wanderer. I am a wanderer. I just didn't come here for sightseeing. The way of the world is that things are not as they seem. Even though you're the son of a pig, you're like a lion. The old man stroked his chin and hesitated before opening his mouth. Can I ask you something? This might be a bit rude. In this situation, throwing out such a question left Johann speechless. And it made him curious. What question would an old man, who was bold enough to lie in wait and ambush him in the dark evening, ask? What is it? Are you really Lord Ates' son? No matter how I think about it, you seem different. Well, it's possible for a lion to be born under a pig. At Johann's words, Kegel opened his mouth wide. And then he started laughing like a madman. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. What's so funny? I never dreamed you'd answer like that. If he were the son of a knight, he would have charged in anger at the insult to his father and his family. Kegel had expected Johann to do so. But Johann casually brushed off the insult. It felt like the witch's prophecy was coming true. Kegel felt his heart pounding. He wanted to pass on his skills to the young man in front of him. But he couldn't just pass them on without any conditions. Kegel started to think. He had planned to subdue Johann when he attacked and then talk. So what's your purpose? Just so you know, I don't have anything. If you want to take some silver coins, it would be better to aim for the feudal lord's office over there where the light is on. Every word you say hits the mark. But I didn't come here to collect silver coins. I have enough of those. At those words, Johann's eyes sparkled. I came here to take a disciple. A disciple? Johann asked as if he found it strange. Yes. I am Kegel, one of the masters of. Have you heard of me? I think I've heard of it. Johann had heard of it before. When a minstrel visited the feudatory, he sang about the great knight Sir Karamov tearing apart the cowardly assassins from the venom of Nessus. Assassin's Guild. Knowing that, this conversation will be easier. You must learn from me. There's no other choice. While speaking, Kegel carefully observed Johann. Naturally, someone raised in a knight's family would first refuse to learn from a master of a dirty, unofficial guild. But Kegel had no intention of accepting a refusal. He was determined to make him his disciple. The old man saw little chance of finding another disciple as fitting as Johann. He was resolute to make him a disciple today, by any means necessary. If he refuses, I'll threaten his and his family's lives to make him swear to learn as my disciple. A vow was sacred, and as a knight, he had no choice but to keep it, even if it was made under duress in a life-threatening situation. That's what knights were like. Johann hesitated before speaking. How much do I have to pay? What? And the words that came out of Johann's mouth were completely beyond expectation. Johann was flabbergasted. A master had come to teach him swordsmanship. What had he eaten wrong? Or was it because Johann had lived so diligently that God was finally blessing him? Of course, that wasn't the case. Johann asked cautiously, "How much do I have to pay?" What? You won't teach me without any compensation. Ha 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 ha. Kegel laughed until tears came out. The wrinkles on his face deepened. When was the last time he laughed like this? He felt like he had never laughed as much as he did today. Do you think I'm a swordsmanship teacher? You're really not Eight's son. I am his son. Say it again. Learning from me, one of the masters, means learning the swordsmanship of an assassin, not the honor of a knight. If a knight who knows honor sees this, he will despise you, and if a priest of the church sees you, he will curse you. Are you still ready to learn? Where is good and evil in strength? When making a sword, do you make it by hammering steel, or do you decide who to kill and who to protect? Swordsmanship is just swordsmanship, it's important who uses it. Wait. If I learn swordsmanship, do I have to join? No. You can live without caring about. You just have to keep my swordsmanship from being interrupted. Then I'm ready anytime. God is fair even to those who don't believe. Follow me. I'll teach you. Kegel felt a surge of vitality in his body with joy. He realized that Johann sincerely regarded him as a teacher. The son of a knight's family respects such an assassin as a teacher. It was something he had never dreamed of. Have you ever learned swordsmanship? No. Try to lift it comfortably and naturally. Johann lifted the sword towards his left shoulder. Left-handed. Left-handers can make good assassins. I have no intention of assassinating. That's what you say. And who knows whether you'll have to assassinate someone in your life. I didn't decide to be an assassin from a young age either. Kegel scanned Johann's body. It was a terrifyingly well-built body. He didn't need any training before giving him a sword. Swordsmanship is not difficult. Once you understand the basics, the rest is practice and proficiency. The problem is whether you can understand that basic. Most people swing their swords all their lives without understanding it. What is the basic? Raise your sword, touching your opponent. His sword does not touch yours. That's it. Johann made a subtle expression. It was really basic. There are as many swordsmanship in the Empire as there are stars. You can't know and respond to all of them. But if you understand, you can see what you're trying to do just by looking at the opponent's actions. So understand. With his words, Kegel cut the tree. Even in the dark where only the moonlight was visible, the sword light flashed. The falling leaves were pierced and fell one by one. Of course, I don't expect you to master it right away. This kind of thing takes time. Don't worry. I have plenty of time, so I'll hammer it into your body. Thank you for your warm words. Don't flatter me, use a stab. Show me your actions. Johann took the same action as Kegel just did. And he stabbed. The air was torn and a cool wind blew. It was as fast as a flash. It was dark, but it felt like it was bright for a moment. Dot again. Johann stabbed again. Kegel was astonished. It was perfect. To the point where there was no need to point out. Let's move on to the next. Ooh? Aren't you looking? Let's move on to the next. Do this too. Kegel showed a technique called in the guild. At first glance, it looks like a normal diagonal cut, but it's a brutal technique that targets the neck and face while coming down on the opponent's weapon. Chapter 5. It required a strength beyond the ordinary to stop in the middle of a full-force swing. Originally, it was a technique that borrowed the power of the opponent's weapon. And Johann did the same. Kegel was able to realize the reason immediately. Kegel focused on Johann's hand and the hilt of the longsword he was holding. Despite seemingly holding it lightly, the hilt creaked as if he was squeezing out even the strength used to suckle milk. It wasn't because the sword was broken or worn out. It was Johann's strength. Open your hand. Did you grip it with all your strength just now? No, I held it lightly. You held the sword lightly when you gripped it. Why did you grip it like that? Even beginners didn't hold the hilt lightly, they gripped it tightly. I've broken it a few times by gripping it too hard. In this place, a weapon like a longsword was a precious item. Even though the Eights family was a knight family, they weren't so well off that they could recklessly break a well-forged longsword. When Johann was young, he had smashed 3 training swords, and after that, he had received a stern warning that if he broke one more, they wouldn't give him a weapon. Although it was an old and shabby longsword, it was better than nothing in this countryside. Johann had been taking care of this longsword in his own way. Hold this. Kegel took out a steel plate and handed it over. Johann grabbed it. Pull it with all your strength. With a dull sound, the steel plate was torn apart as it was. Kegel's eyes widened even more. Truly monstrous strength. I'm not a monster. Johann spoke in a dissatisfied tone. Although he had a good physique and innate strength, that didn't make him a monster. It seems like you haven't had a chance to use your full strength because you don't have a need for it. If you were born 1,000 years ago, you would have been a hero in mythology. In the ancient empire's mythology, there were unbelievable heroes. Heroes who immersed their bodies in the river of the underworld, making them impervious to spears and swords, or heroes who possessed innate strength and brought down massive temples with their power. Of course, no one seriously believed in such things. It was just a bygone epic. But Kegel knew. The fact that such an epic was created meant that there were people with abilities to match it. Even if not impervious to spears and swords, at least the muscles and skin would have been tough and hard like a beast's, and even if they couldn't bring down a temple, they would have been strong enough to break a bull's neck. And in Kegel's view, Johann's brute strength was enough to fit into that category. It wasn't just a good physique and good innate muscular strength. A brute strength that surpasses common sense. Kegel had lived a long life and had wandered not only in the Empire but also in other places. He had seen a few people who showed strength beyond ordinary humans. And among them, Johann was the best. Even Furfing, a knight from the Erland's kingdom who was rumored to have the strength of a giant, and Kaiwood, renowned for his formidable power among the knights of the Osman Empire, didn't seem to be at that level. As Kegel fell silent, Johann became anxious. Was there a problem? Is there a problem? A problem? No. There's no problem. Unless you can't control your body because of your overflowing strength, but that's not the case. Unimaginable brute strength. A natural physique. An eye that grasps the essence of technique at a glance. And a beast-like sharp instinct that ties all this together. Johann was already a complete warrior before he was taught. Kegel got up and stretched out his fingers. There were 7. It will take 7 to teach you. 7 years. I'm not sure if I can hold out that long in this feudatory. Can Jessenate survive for 7 years? He might have been able to if he lived a little more restrained life. Not 7 years. 7 days. 1 week is enough. Excuse me. Even to teach the assassin's codes that are easier to understand if you experience them directly, if you just learn the techniques, 7 minutes is enough. Isn't that too fast? Johann's eyes were now filled with disbelief. He seemed to be uncomfortable because he was taught too quickly. Kegel shook his head. Treating a grown lion like a cub only dulls the claws. Don't pretend to be weak. You're a lion. With that, Kegel drew his sword. It was slightly thinner than a regular longsword and had a sharp end. As soon as he drew his sword, Kegel transformed from a shriveled old man into an assassin who had been killing people all his life. You're a lion, so now it's time to learn. The stiff-necked knight dastards talk about forms and structures, but I don't like that. You're the type who realizes it at a glance, so you'll fully embody it once you experience it. Wait. Johann realized what Kegel was trying to do. The sword blade, bathed in moonlight, emitted a creepy glow. Kegel, who had been 7 steps away, was now swinging his sword in front of him. Johann gritted his teeth and bent his body. The sword barely grazed his body and passed by. Kegel smiled satisfactorily. He had really tried to stab him, but he had avoided it. He was indeed like a lion. This is the guild's secret technique. It was a technique specialized for surprise attacks, and even an excellent knight could be pierced in one blow if he didn't know it. This technique, which loosens the movement of the feet and then quickly bounces out, required cunning and strength. I see you're an assassin. Johann grumbled as if he was dissatisfied. Kegel deepened his smile and said, Are you saying you just realized I'm an assassin? You're slower than I thought. Move. Those who don't move don't deserve to live. A swordsman had to keep moving and fighting. And Johann was already accepting that teaching. Johann, who didn't back down in fear of the sword but rather rushed forward to prevent Kegel from swinging his sword, was a born warrior. His instinct as a warrior told him so. Johann was already a warrior before Kegel taught him. He just didn't know it because he was among sheep and pigs. In the dark forest, the young warrior and the old assassin bared their teeth and faced each other. Kegel did not lie. It took Johann only a day to master all of Kegel's techniques. And after 2 days, Johann began to push Kegel. After 3 days, Kegel had no choice but to hold out against Johann and hope for a stroke of luck. When something flew from the side with a thud sound, Johann caught it with his fist without even turning his body. A sharp awl was flying towards his cheek. When did this happen? Have you ever seen an assassin fight fair? There was nothing just now. Surely Johann and Kegel had come here for the first time today when the day was bright, and even the training place was chosen by Johann. Kegel couldn't have come here in advance and set it up. But how on earth is there a trap? I taught you how to set traps. You're not thinking like an assassin, Johann. I've taught you all my techniques, but that doesn't make you an assassin. Do you understand what I'm saying? I think I understand. Johann felt it while living with Kegel. The mindset of an assassin is different from the bone. Kegel taught him all his swordsmanship, not only the guild swordsmanship, but also various other techniques, but he did not teach Johann the mindset of an assassin. Because it wasn't something that could be done by teaching. The mindset of an assassin was something that was realized by entering the unofficial guild and eating the blood of many people. If you don't realize it, you'll die, and if you live, you'll realize it. You're a lion. A lion doesn't need to graze. I'm saying you don't need to live as an assassin. Just learn how to deal with it. If you don't want to die somewhere. Before he finished speaking, Johann kicked a tree. The thick tree split in half with a groaning sound. Kegel backed away with a stunned expression. Who told you to deal with it like that? Is it not allowed? It's a very good way. Even a delicate trap would be destroyed if you went around smashing things like this. When the plan went awry, Kegel moved to the next trap. Johann followed, on guard. Another day of training has ended. Originally, Johann, who would have ended up drenched in sweat, ended with a few drops of sweat, and Kegel realized that Johann had finished adapting. There is no need to teach anymore. Kegel, who originally did not stay in one place, felt regret now. There's nothing more I can teach you. Johann just stared at Kegel in response. It was a look asking him to stay a little longer, but Kegel refused. I've never stayed in one place for long. Because you're an assassin. No, you fool. I've been like that since before I became an assassin. Why is it always because of the assassin? Johann averted his gaze as if embarrassed. I've taught you everything I can teach you. There are a few things you haven't learned, but there's nothing you can do about it. Try this. Kegel said, throwing a twig. Originally, was a technique to hold a hidden dagger or secret weapon in your hand at once. If you were proficient in this technique, you could kill your opponent in one shot even in a crowded market and slip away without anyone knowing. But Johann was not good at this technique. Because... Crack! The twig broke as it was. Kegel shook his head. Relax the power. I did relax. Well, if God gives you one, you have to take one. It wasn't because the twig was weak. Johann broke even a sturdy dagger or steel all equally. He was not good at handling such delicate techniques because he was born with strength. Kegel didn't bother to say it. Complacency was the enemy of a warrior. A sheep that was scared and running around was better than a wolf that was complacent. I'm satisfied as long as my technique doesn't disappear and continues. I don't have any specific expectations from you, and I don't have any grudges to pay back. Live well on your own. Thank you, Master. But there are a few words to leave. If you have a chance to teach my technique, tell them the name of Kegel of the Dot. I swear. And don't use the secret techniques I taught you unless you have to. Remember when you use it. Kill the opponent. Yes. Kill it for sure. It's annoying if they find out. Of course, there won't be many who find out. Chapter 6. There was a scent of blood in Kegel's voice. That he was a guild of assassins. And assassins were those who only showed their skills when they were about to kill their opponent. If you're not in a hurry, you won't need things like arcane techniques. You won't have any enemies with just ordinary swordsmanship. A lion didn't need techniques. Johann, who learned from Kegel, had already become a person who knew how to swing a sword, how to fight. That was enough. A simple vertical slash became a cutting strike that tore space, and a horizontal slash became a claw that tore plate armor. What was the point of complex techniques? Those who didn't know much about swordsmanship worshipped complex techniques and pursued such techniques, but originally, when it reached the extreme, it became simple. The simplest thing is the most efficient. And Johann already knew that well. He seemed to not know, but his body was showing it. What Kegel showed was the way of fighting of an assassin, but Johann did not follow it exactly. He melted it down and used it to suit himself. If Kegel's fight was a swallow, Johann's fight was closer to a rock. He was originally a born knight. Even if he showed the sword of an assassin, he melted it into the swordsmanship of a knight. So it was a pity. And next let's see. You might meet a guild member of while you're alive. Are you saying I should show mercy then? Why do you keep talking nonsense? If you meet them, kill them right away. Don't listen to what they say. Johann made a bewildered expression. You said there was a master there. If there are 10, 5 are trash and 4 are murderers. There's nothing good about getting involved. You won't lose, but if you get caught up in an assassin's fight, it's annoying. You don't want to be addicted and groaning. But one person is fine. One person is a weirdo like me, but even that won't be good for you. If you don't get along, it will be a scarier opponent than the previous 9. Kegel rolled up his sleeve. A snake with 9 heads was drawn as a tattoo. It was a tattoo drawn with a special drug, and it was a tattoo that did not appear unless the body temperature rose. Remember. Be careful if you meet someone with this tattoo. Be more careful if there are many heads. The more heads the snake had, the higher the position in the guild, and it meant that it was a skilled assassin. I guess I'll have to go to use traps. That's a good idea. Of course, the other party wouldn't easily fall for that trick. Kegel started to fold his fingers. What else should I tell you? Ah. That's right. Get a sword. One that's sturdy enough for you to use. The one you're using now isn't unusable, but it's like a twig for you. If you use all your strength, it will break. I'm thinking of something like a sword made of Tharnu's steel. Give up. It's impossible. Tharnu's steel. It was a rare steel that could only be made in the ancient empire that covered countries like the Holy Empire or Erland's kingdom, which had long since perished. Since the ancient empire perished and the technology disappeared, no new items were coming out. The weapon made of that steel was light and unbreakable. It was truly magical steel. All the swords with known materials are all owned by famous nobles, and if you steal them, you'll be chased until you die. Unless you run away to the Isman Empire with it, there's too much to give up just to get a sword. Just go find the dwarf tribe of the empire. The dwarfs are stubborn and closed-minded, but they are excellent figures in the empire. If you can persuade them well, they will make you a sturdy sword. The majority of the Holy Empire was occupied by humans. Both the serfs and the nobles were humans. However, there were dwarfs who formed tribes and lived here and there, and the feudal lords valued them very much. The dwarfs with excellent metallurgy were just like geese that lay golden eggs. Of course, this did not apply to the Yates family. If it was a fiefdom with dwarfs, the Yates family would not have been able to acquire it. I think I've told you everything. Hide the techniques, don't deal with assassins, get a sword, what else is there? I think you've told me everything. Ah. I forgot to talk about this. Have you seen a black wolf? The black wolf of the forest that Johann saw when he went hunting with Joseph. Since then, Johann had not been able to go hunting. Yes. Be careful. It's a bad omen. It's a symbol of death. Didn't it foresee the master's coming? Even to Johann's joke, Kegel answered seriously. If I had killed someone, it would have been a prediction of me, but since I didn't kill anyone, it would have been a prediction of something else. Remember, the black wolf is a sign of death. You should always be afraid when death is approaching. I should be afraid, but it sounds like a superstition. Those who believe in superstitions are fools, but those who don't believe are even more foolish. I also had a time when I was young when I didn't believe in superstitions. But Johann, there's a reason for superstitions. It's like magic. It's better to believe than not to believe. Johann nodded his head. If Kegel said so, it might be true. Fear death. Johann, even if you are blessed by God, death will not care. I will remember and be afraid. That's a good attitude. Suddenly, Kegel got up and started walking away. Are you leaving? Yes. Don't follow me. I hate someone following me from behind. And Kegel left. He really didn't look back. 3 days have passed since Kegel left. Johann slumped down, biting his tongue. It was fun when he was learning swordsmanship from Kegel and sparring. He felt like he was doing something. But when Kegel left, he felt empty again. A life of just baking bread without any goal. What's the point of being an excellent swordsman? Kegel gave Johann confidence. Before meeting Kegel, Johann didn't know he was a lion. But now he knew who he was. The only reason he didn't leave first was because he couldn't get anything unless his father, Jessen Eitz, was around. His stepmother and half-brothers wouldn't wish him luck and give him a hefty amount of money. They would just tell him to get lost. To get at least something, he had to speak up when Jessen Eitz was there. It doesn't seem like he'll give me anything. There were too many children, so the chances seemed a bit low. Johann considered just leaving several times. Damn! If Master saw this, he would say I'm living miserably. Kegel would have just robbed the feudatory and run away, but that wasn't Johann's style. He didn't want to create resentment for a few silver coins. He heard the sound of horse hooves with dust from afar. At first, he thought Jessen Eitz was coming back. There was no one in this manor who could make such a heavy sound of horse hooves. But it wasn't. Knights he had never seen before were riding horses from afar. There were only about 10 people, but Johann felt an ominous feeling for some reason. Sir Karamaf was a renowned elf knight, so famous that even Johann would have heard of him. Elves, with their superior looks and twice the lifespan of humans, occupied noble positions all over the continent. Especially in the western kingdom of the empire, the Erland's kingdom, most of the nobles were elves. Sir Karamaf was also a knight from the Erland's kingdom. Although he was from the Erland's kingdom, Sir Karamaf was a knight trusted by the emperor to the extent that he was entrusted with soldiers. He played a heroic role in the rebellion in the west and was a knight who won duels against numerous knights. Nobles who held a grudge against Sir Karamaf called him the. This was because Sir Karamaf had killed many nobles. And such a Sir Karamaf visited the main house of the Eitz family. It's an honor, Sir Karamaf, to meet you like this. The youngest, John Eitz, spoke desperately. His eyes sparkled with admiration. The eldest son, Philip Eitz, who was standing behind him, looked at John as if he was displeased. However, he was also shrinking in front of Sir Karamaf. Welcome to the fiefdom, Sir Karamaf. The meal is modest, but I hope you eat a lot and relieve your fatigue. Philip spoke as if he was the owner. At this, Mrs. Eitz frowned. She couldn't stand her eldest stepson stepping forward and ignoring the youngest. Isn't it my role to entertain guests when Sir Eitz is not here? Alas, Mrs. Eitz. I did it for you, fearing you might make a mistake in unfamiliar work. It's something I've been doing even before Mrs. Eitz arrived. Though Philip is a son and stepmother to Mrs. Eitz, he was over 30. There wasn't much age difference between him and Mrs. Eitz. The two glared at each other, refusing to back down. Philip, who had earned the trust of the Eitz family's vassals by working with them for a long time. Mrs. Eitz, who could sway Sir Eitz with pillow talk. Their confrontation was so intense that even the serfs of the fiefdom knew about it. Sir Eitz. And the one who interrupted their conversation was Sir Karamaf. Where is he? What? Sir Eitz is currently in another fiefdom. Which fiefdom? Karamaf's voice had lost its honorifics and turned cold and metallic. However, everyone present was so overpowered by Karamaf that they didn't notice. That far. Sir Eight often travels abroad. List all the places he could be. That far. What's the matter? It's none of your concern. Everyone from the Eight's family stiffened. Even so, this was too rude. How rude it was for a guest invited into someone else's manor to behave this way. Even if it was Sir Karamaf, they couldn't tolerate it. Sir Karamaf. That's too rude. Apologize for your rudeness. Whoosh! Karamaf turned his head. His piercing gaze fixed on Philip, making him feel as if his heart had frozen. Those cold, metallic eyes. What? See coming here and... Ho ho ho. It seems Philip is nervous and misspoke. Sir Karamaf, why don't you talk to my son John? That woman. Philip gritted his teeth. Using such a situation where the Eight's family was insulted for a fight. Dishes prepared for Karamaf came out. Lamb in bin soup, robust cock meat grilled with herbs, soft white bread. Sir Karamaf pushed them away without eating. It was a harsh world for gourmets. Although it was easier to obtain spices than in the real world's Middle Ages, it wasn't possible to eat as much as desired. Dishes like bin soup boiled with lamb finely chopped and marinated in beef broth with onions, then cooked with wine and spices, or whole grilled plump cock meat were something Johann could only occasionally enjoy. When Johann did, he would sit at the table and eat, even if he received glares like. But Karamaf pushed away all the food as if he had no interest in it. Having a conversation isn't bad. When you find out where Sir Eights is, come and tell me. It's an honor to meet you like this. Could you please teach my son John a thing or two? No. Karamaf said no more and left the hall. The insult was so severe that even Mrs. Eights hardened her face.